everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In case you don't know me, my name is Christine Rodriguez, and I have a podcast called Astrology Now Podcast where I post weekly. So if you're interested in astrological forecasts or horoscopes, you can find me there on any major platform for podcasting like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So today we are going to be talking about a very specific combination in the D9 chart. So remember that I use the Vedic system of astrology, I use the sidereal system of astrology, and in the Vedic system, we have the divisional charts. Now, the D9 chart is a divisional chart that gives us so much information into the type of spouse that we are going to get, how we are going to operate in long-term relationship. But of course, the D9 also is going to give us insight into how our planets are going to operate long-term, and it gives us a really good understanding of the kind of like the foundation of the planet. So for example, if you have an afflicted planet in the D9, it kind of disrupts the foundation a little bit of the D1 planet, of the natal planet. But of course, we want to take everything into consideration, and that's an entirely different topic. But today we are going to be talking about a very specific combination in the D9, which is the combination of the nodes of Rahu or Ketu with the planet Saturn. Now, the techniques that I'm going to talk about today are going to be applicable to some other planets. I've seen consistencies with Jupiter as well, but I haven't done as much research on Jupiter specifically. So we're going to talk about Saturn today. Maybe Jupiter is something we can do in the future, but a hunch tells me it's going to be something very similar. So what teed me off to this was I was looking at one of my best friend's charts, and she has Saturn and Ketu together in her D9 chart. I was doing relationship research as usual, and I saw that when she met her husband, her ex-husband, when she met him, Saturn and Ketu were conjoined. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. You know, that combination was present during their meeting when that is what is reflected in her D9 chart, the chart of the spouse. So then I went to go look at what was happening when she met her ex-fiance. So she almost got married again, serious long-term relationship. Same combination. When she met her ex-husband, when she met her ex-fiance, Saturn and Ketu were conjoined both times, reflecting her D9. And right off the top of my head, I thought of so many other friends and celebrities that I've seen have this combination. So let's go ahead and kick it into the research mind and see what else we can find. And so I looked at multiple charts of multiple types of couples. I looked at multiple celebrities. They're not my favorite case examples because you don't really know them. You don't know if the dates are accurate, but I did what I could. And then of course, I got a lot of information from people in my personal life. And so what I came to find is that if you have a node, Rahu or Ketu, conjoined Saturn in your D9 chart, the chart of the spouse, it's not always, but very likely for one of these factors at least to be present. And it's like clockwork, it's wild. So the first note I made is that having Rahu Ketu synastry with Saturn. And so what I mean by that is that when you look at the two charts side by side, one person's Rahu or Ketu is in the same sign as their partner's Saturn. I saw this over and over and over again, and I'm going to show you with examples later. We have tons of case studies we're going to look at today. And so that was something I noticed, is that if one of the nodes is with Saturn in the D9, when it comes to synastry with a partner, Rahu or Ketu, it can switch, will be in the same sign as their partner Saturn or vice versa. The second note I made is that you meet your person when Rahu or Ketu are transiting with Saturn astrologically. This was something that I saw repeatedly. We're going to look at it in case examples. I've noticed, like with my first friend that I mentioned, if somebody has a node with Saturn in their D9, they may meet their partner, their significant other, while Saturn is conjoined Rahu or Ketu in transit. But I've also seen that this could work for when they get married. A significant event with a partner, usually it's meeting the partner or getting married. That's what I saw the vast majority of the time. I'll show you my data. So the third note I have is that when you meet, Rahu or Ketu are transiting your natal Saturn. So if you have Rahu or Ketu conjoined your Saturn in your D9 chart, it could be that you meet someone significant when Rahu or Ketu are transiting your natal Saturn. Okay, so if your partner has this, you can look at it for them as well. But it's the person's chart. Note 4 is that there is synastry with Saturn, Rahu, or Ketu in the D9. So for example, if you're looking at your partner's D9 chart and your D9 chart side by side, Saturn is in the same sign as Rahu or Ketu. Number 5 is that the partner has Rahu and Saturn or Saturn and Ketu conjoined in their birth chart. I've seen this quite a bit, where if an individual has Saturn and a node conjoined in their D9, they're attracted to people with Saturn and a node conjoined in their D1. We're going to look at an example of it. Final, least frequent, is that a partner also has Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn conjoined in their D9. So if individual number 1 has Saturn and Rahu in Aries, partner number 2 could have Saturn and Ketu in Scorpio in their D9 chart, but it's mimicking that energy. And so these are the main things that I've seen. Again, it's like clockwork, and it really makes intuitive sense. It makes sense that if someone has that energy in their D9 chart, when something is happening astrologically, that it churns that energy into existence. It triggers something. Now, I haven't been able to get super precise with how it's going to play out, but I have compiled this list and I do feel very confident in it. And so I'm really excited to show you all how it works with all the case examples that I have today. All right, everyone. So here we are with all of our case studies, and I'm going to show you how this begins to work. Something else that I wanted to add on is that I noticed a synchronicity that a lot of people who have this combination met at a party, like a social gathering, they met through a friend, or they met specifically on a blind date. Super interesting. So Amal Clooney is going to be our first case example. We don't know her exact birth time. It doesn't matter. She's going to have Rahu and Saturn conjoined in her D9 chart regardless. So this is the D9. We see she has Rahu and Saturn conjoined. Now, let's go ahead and look at George Clooney, and we're going to refer to that list we compiled earlier. So if we look at their synastry, we see, again, she has Rahu and Saturn in her D9. When we look at their synastry, they have the Saturn-Rahu connection. It's like their connection fulfills that Rahu-Saturn energy. It's quite interesting. Okay, so that is, I think that was the first note that we made together. Now, when they met, George Clooney was at one of his houses, I suppose, in Italy. A friend was coming over. They asked if they could bring an additional friend, and they brought Amal. The friend literally brought Amal to George Clooney's house. That's where they met. Now, it was difficult to ascertain the exact day that they met, but we know it was July 2013. For all of July, this combination would be occurring. We see that Saturn and Rahu were conjoined in Libra. So she has Saturn and Rahu conjoined in her D9, and we see it conjoined when her and George Clooney met, in addition to having that Rahu-Saturn combination in their synastry. All right, the second case example that we'll do is Tom Brady and Giselle. So Tom Brady and Giselle were set up on a blind date. That's how they met. It's kind of funny. Like, imagine having a blind date be Tom Brady or Giselle. Like, how did that even go down? But anyway, that's what happened. So if we look at Tom Brady and Giselle back to back, we look at their synastry together. We see that Tom Brady has Ketu and Saturn conjoined in his D9. Do you see that? This is Tom Brady's D9 chart. We see that his Saturn and Ketu are together. They also have that Rahu-Saturn connection in synastry. Now, I want you guys to pay attention, because just because it's Rahu-Saturn, Saturn-Ketu, it seems to be interchangeable with the research I've done so far. It's like Saturn being with the node it eclipses the energy, it fulfills that essence that is shown through their chart, and that's what activates the karma. So even though it's not Ketu and Saturn, we do see the Saturn Rahu combination in their synastry. So it looks like Giselle's Rahu is in the same sign as Tom Brady's Saturn. Okay. So it already fulfills that kind of energy from his D9. But let's look at the day that they met, or the month that they met at least. Lo and behold, Ketu and Saturn were conjoined. And I think actually with them, I can't remember for sure. They met in 2006, and I'm pretty sure this combination occurred for all of 2006. It was something like that. But for sure, Ketu and Saturn were conjoined when Tom met Giselle, which reflects his D9 chart. Wild stuff. Okay. Now, Kate Moss is an interesting case. She has only been married once, and I don't think that that relationship was super good for whatever reasons. We could explore that some other time. We see in her D9 that she has Ketu and Saturn conjoined. When she met her husband, which I think was in like summer of 2007, we see that Saturn and Ketu were conjoined. Do you see that? Saturn and Ketu were conjoined when she met her only husband. She has only been married once. It mimics that Saturn Ketu in her D9 chart over and over and over again. But remember, this doesn't work 100% of the time. It's common, but I'm going to show you other factors to look at. And then we do have an outlier who I'm going to show y'all. So Camila Cabello and Shawn Mendes. So Shawn Mendes, bless his heart, seems like he's had a hard time lately. Now he has Saturn and Rahu conjoined in his D9. So this one's a little bit different, I think. I can't quite remember. Camila Cabello has Saturn and Ketu in her chart. So remember, when we were looking at that list that we compiled, we're seeing that the partner has this combination in their birth chart. It fulfills that essence from the D9. Now, let's just go ahead and look at their charts side by side just to scope it out. So there's no other Saturn combination, Saturn Rahu combination. It does not seem that there is a Rahu Saturn combination in the D9, which I'm going to show y'all. That's a possibility. But when they went public with their dating, Saturn and Ketu were conjoined. And I actually went back and I tried to find when they first met. And that year, Saturn and Ketu were also conjoined. It was Saturn Rahu, Saturn Ketu, something like that. But it's very difficult to find the exact dates for celebrities. But when they went public, Saturn and Ketu were conjunct. That's when they started getting all the publicity. That's when their relationship really came to light and the public was acknowledging it. He has that Saturn Rahu combination. So we're going to do a few more celebrities, and then I'm going to get into people I actually know. Okay, so Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, I thought were a really great example because everybody loves them. They get couple goals all the time. People seem to really love and cherish them as a couple. So I was like, excellent. Let's see what's going on for them. And I really like this example because it is a pivot point into a different factor. So what we're going to be looking at with Ryan Reynolds and Blake is the combination in the D9 chart, and we're going to be looking at when they got married. Actually, there is a significant connection between Rahu and Saturn. I have seen this a lot. At the other examples we've looked at, Rahu and Ketu were with Saturn upon meeting. But what I like about Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively is that they get married when Rahu is, or with Rahu or Ketu transiting Saturn. We need to take a look. I actually forget, so we'll check it out. But so here is Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively's chart. And so we see that there is not that synastry between Rahu or Ketu that we've been seeing. So that's good, right? If you have Rahu and Ketu conjoin Saturn in your D9 chart, you're not destined to have to be with someone your Saturn is conjoined their node with, right? It gives freedom, so that's nice. We look at the D9 and we see that her Saturn is in the same sign as his Rahu, right? They have the same Saturn placement. That means that her Saturn is conjoined his Rahu in the D9. That fulfills a level of karma. That makes sense. Now, I went to go find when they met on set of Green Lantern or whatever. I don't even know what movie it was. I'm sorry. This was when they met. Now, I go to look at his chart because he's the one who has the combination. So we're really looking at him. He's the one who, quote unquote, matters more in this research. And I didn't see anything significant, which we did so far, right? We don't see Saturn transiting Ketu, Saturn transiting Rahu, vice versa. We don't see any of that happening. But when we look at them getting married on September 9th of 2012, now suddenly we see the connection. We see that Saturn was transiting his natal Rahu. Boom. Saturn and Rahu are conjoined in his D9. Saturn and Rahu were conjoined astrologically when he made the biggest commitment of his life to a very, very special person in his life, okay? So it doesn't necessarily have to mean the meeting date. It can also mean the marriage date, which we're also going to see spectacularly with the real people examples I'm going to show you. Not that these aren't real people, but you know what I mean. So here is Joe Rogan. He's another one who I pinned down to have this Saturn Ketu combination in his D9 chart. Now we go to his wife's chart. We run a composite. We don't see any combinations between Rahu or Saturn, between the D1. But her Saturn is in the same sign as his Rahu in the D9. Do you see that? So her Saturn is in Gemini, his Rahu is in Gemini. So they have that synastry. It's just in the D9 chart. Now, this was when Joe Rogan met his wife. And I actually don't remember if there's anything significant here. Nothing too wild that's standing out to me. You see Saturn, Rahu, Saturn, Rahu. There is no direct combination there. So there we go. There wasn't necessarily something that astrologically cued it. And I mean, they've had a very, very long, successful relationship. So one of the outliers I wanted to share is actually Jeff Bezos. Granted, I don't think that I looked at when he got married. I looked at when he met his wife, when he met his fiance. I didn't see anything significant. His fiance's chart, his wife's chart, I didn't see anything significant with Saturn in the nodes. I failed to look at when he got married to his first wife. I failed to look at the exact date. So there might be something significant there. The other thing I saw is that when he went public with his relationship with his new fiance, a few weeks after Saturn and Ketu conjoined. So that was the only thing that I saw. Otherwise, I didn't really see any significance with that, which I thought was interesting. So here is the chart of one of my good friends' significant others. We see that he has Saturn and Ketu in his D9 chart conjoined again, right? This is what we're doing. So this is her husband. We go to her chart and we look, is there synastry between Rahu and Saturn? That's really what we're looking for. Rahu or Ketu with Saturn. So we actually see the same thing that we saw with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. She has Saturn in the same sign as his Saturn. Do you see that? She has Saturn in Capricorn. He has Saturn in Ketu in Capricorn. So it kind of fulfills that synastry element. Now, what I thought was really cool is that when my friends met, Saturn was transiting his natal Rahu. So this was the day that they met in 2015. Saturn is in the sign of Scorpio, transiting his natal Rahu, which fulfills that Saturn with the node energy. Super interesting. So these are some of my other friends. I just made their names different so that I could keep track of everybody. These are devotee friends that I have. They're absolutely wonderful. And so we see in her D9 chart that she has Saturn and Rahu together in Gemini. Okay, so she has that Rahu-Saturn combination. We look at her partner. Let's do a composite. And lo and behold, they have Ketu and Saturn in the same sign. So it fulfills that synastry aspect. It's like she's looking for someone who's going to feel kind of Rahu, kind of Ketu, kind of Saturn. You know, Saturn with a node is really what we're looking for. And they complete that energy in synastry. And of course, they have the same nodal signs in their D9, which we know is a really good thing from the first video I've made on synastry recently. So also, his Rahu is with her Saturn, or excuse me, his Ketu is with her Saturn in the D9 chart. So 2 ways we see the synastry completing that essence that her soul is looking for. And so what I thought was sweet about this couple is that I didn't see anything significant when they first met with Rahu and Ketu specifically. She was having a Rahu Ketu return in her first house. I mean, that's significant. But I didn't see anything significant with Saturn and one of the nodes. Okay. Didn't match her chart, you know, weren't transiting together. I didn't see anything significant when they got married. But when they got engaged, this was the day that he proposed. If we go and we look just a week ahead of time, or maybe it'd be 2 weeks, Saturn and Ketu would be together. So though it wasn't exact, it was pretty freaking close. So I don't want to save that because I messed up the date. Okay, so this case study is amazing. This is one of my longtime friends, clients, collaborators. We see that he has Saturn and Rahu conjoined. I looked at when he met and when he married each 3 of his wives. So he was married 3 times. I looked at when he met all 3 of them, didn't really see anything significant. But 2 out of 3 of the marriages in this first one, Rahu is in the same sign as his Saturn. Do you see that? Rahu was transiting his Saturn when he got married the first time. I'll show you guys. See this? Rahu was in the same sign as his Saturn. And then the second time he got married, Saturn and Ketu were conjoined astrologically. So Saturn and Ketu again were conjoined in transit when he got married the second time. And so really what I want to get across here is that if Saturn and Rahu, Saturn and Ketu are conjoined in the D9 chart, there is going to be something significant. And so in conclusion, I wanted to demonstrate how having Saturn conjoined one of the nodes in the D9 chart can give us insight into the types of people someone is going to be drawn to or attracted to, and when a special meeting may take place. So I hope that you found this as interesting as I did. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I hope that you have fun doing your own research. Again, my name is Christine Rodriguez. Here are all of my socials. I hope to see you soon.